Good morning, or is it? It's one good afternoon as of 1 minute ago. So good morning. My name is Ala McCoy. I'm Director of Startup Support at UM Ventures at the University of Maryland, and I'd like to welcome those who joined us today for this presentation to hear about translational funding opportunity for University of Maryland faculty, specifically Maryland Innovation Initiative grant provided by TEDCO. And we are joined today to present by people who know this program the best through working on applications, grant applications for many years and going through defense of these applications countless times. So today we're joined by SiteMiners, who are not only people who help create and write these applications, but they also are the people who defend these applications at TEDCO, interact with reviewers, and interact with others at TEDCO, and really know this program in and out, what's required and what is a winning application, what makes a winning application. So today we're joined by Mark Komisky, Dan Nadash, and Annastasiah Mhaka, and thank you so much for joining. I'll let them speak a little bit about their background and about the program itself. In the meantime, while you're listening to the presentation, if you have a question, please submit it via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you see that somebody else asked a question you'd like to hear an answer to, you can vote on it, upvote that to the top of the line to be asked. And also at the end of the Q&A, at the end of the presentation, we'll have time for Q&A, and you can still keep asking your questions via the Q&A by typing your question there, and you can type it with your name attached or anonymously, and I will not say your name. Or you can also raise your hand and we can unmute your microphone and you can ask your question that way. So again, thank you so much for our fearless SiteMiners. And thank you to those who joined to listen to that presentation. All right, so take it away, Mark.
Great, thanks, Al, I appreciate it. So just to clarify this, so this whole presentation is about the Maryland Innovation Initiative, or MII program, which is a funding mechanism for translational technology, and really with a focus on commercializing it and bringing technology innovations at the University of Maryland to market. Ideally in the form of a startup, but certainly licensing is also an opportunity if you're looking to license it to another company. But again, the focus really is how do we bring an innovation that a researcher at the University of Maryland created, how do we turn that into a product and bring it to market? So briefly, my background is I've started 2 cybersecurity software companies, raised venture funding. I've done the whole soup to nuts, everything from 3 guys in a PowerPoint and an idea, all the way out to a $50 million acquisition offer with, I think, $30 million of investment along the way. I have been with the SiteMiner program and working with Ala for, are we coming up on 6 years now? I think something like that. And have defended and worked with a number of researchers and done dozens, of seemingly hundreds, but dozens of MII applications with a very high success rate. My focus really is around, I come from a software background, so obviously I've worked a lot with software, but through the MII program, I've done things like nanomaterials, enhancements to microscopes, even worked with Annastasiah on a genetic engineering project too. So I've done a wide range of technologies. Dan, do you want to take it away?
Sure. Can you see me? I'm on there.
You're good.
Hey, I'm Dan Nadash. I'm a very proud Terp, University of Maryland alumnus. I've been executive in residence and a SiteMiner with UM Ventures since 2017. By way of background, I grew up in Western PA and came to the University of Maryland via Capitol Hill, where I had already started before my freshman year working for my hometown congressman. And I got involved in the initial congressional races of now Congressman Steny Hoyer, and I worked full-time on Tom McMillan, a University of Maryland All-American NBA basketball player, the university's first Rhodes Scholar, and Olympian in his race for Congress in 1986. And following Tom's election, I did politics and government relations for the real estate industry on Capitol Hill. I then worked as a operator for a hyper-growth startup enterprise software company in California, pre-IPO, post-IPO. Then worked as a principal in an investment fund on clean energy, and I've consulted on numerous engagements with companies in diverse marketplaces. Given my government affairs background, I've always enjoyed the nexus of government policy and regulatory regimes and markets. So I'm very into how a perceived market impediment can be a market driver, or how businesses can serve public policy goals while serving their own go-to-market strategies. Thank you.
Annastasiah. Annastasiah, can you hear us?
Sorry, yeah, I was unmuting myself. Okay, good day, everyone. I'm excited to be here with this great team, which shares my passion for innovation and commercialization. I wear several hats, but most relevant to the UMD is that I was formerly trained as a chemist and molecular medical scientist, but I've since focused my entire career on blending business, science, and emerging technologies such as nanoelectronics and AI to truly bring affordable, effective, and accessible products to benefit all patients. I've done this both from inside and outside academia, working with several PIs in the form of startups, capital formation, strategic partnering, and coalition building. In that regard, I've co-founded 5 startups across the healthcare spectrum, raising over 70 million in seed and Series A, and with companies securing 60 million in follow-on investment. I joined the site minor role last year, and I'm continuing to learn the ropes from Dan, Mark, and Ala. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Great, thanks, Annastasiah. Is your microphone working okay? Can everybody hear her okay? Yep.
Her
Yeah,
volume.
your sound faded away at the end.
Yeah, I don't know, Annastasiah. Check that out. Check on that. Okay, moving along. So what is the MII? What is an MII program? The MII program is actually funded by the Maryland State Legislature. It is managed by TEDCO, which is the Technology Development Corporation, which is a creation of the Maryland State Legislature. But it's really focused on funding promising technology that's coming out of the 5 major research institutions in the state of Maryland. That would be the University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and the University of Maryland, Baltimore County campus, as well as Morgan State University. Again, these are the 5 major research institutions where there is significant innovation coming out of the labs and researchers and faculty there. And so that's really the focus, is helping those participant universities. They each pay into the program, and part of the things they pay for are site miners. Site miners are actually only part-time. We are not full-time employees of the university. We really just focus specifically on helping researchers as part of this program, and we're part-time, basically contractors to the university. And again, the focus of the MII program is, how do you bring a technology innovation to market in the form of a product? Like, how do you get it into consumers' hands who are actually going to buy it? And that is one of the challenges. Ooh, jumped ahead. So there are 2 phases to the program. The first phase is the technology assessment phase. The technology assessment phase really runs through the university. So as a researcher, you can apply as an employee of the university. The money would come through the university. It comes in the form of a grant. So there is no equity, there's no loan paybacks, there's none of those typical headaches tied to an investment or a loan. And there is no overhead. There's no business overhead that would come from the Office of Research Administration. So the good news is all the money from the grant actually comes to the project. There's not a lot of carve-offs. The company formation phase is the second phase. The company formation phase really is what it sounds like. Once you've gone through the process of taking an innovation and at least turning it into like a prototype that can be tested with potential outside parties or even inside parties. And Annastasiah will talk a little bit about how life sciences is different in a few slides. But once you get to sort of a prototype phase that you can actually prove that a product works. Then you move on to company formation phase, where you actually form a company. In this part of the project, money doesn't go to the university, it actually goes to the company. So it goes from TEDCO to the company that is formed to run it. And it is a project that is run inside the company. You can still work with university researchers, and you as a faculty can stay a faculty and continue working with the company, but the money does actually go through the company. That money is actually in the form of either a convertible or repayable note. And in that case, it's debt that the company would pay back to TEDCO if they're successful in bringing the product to market. And obviously, since it's not a grant, there is no overhead. It's not going through the university. There is no overhead associated with the company formation funding. To go in a little bit more detail about each one of the phases, the technology assessment phase, again, as we said, is really bringing a lab-based innovation to a proof of concept prototype, typically in the form of a product or actually a working algorithm or even a material that you can actually test with or work with. You must have some preliminary data to prove that there is something that is working here. You can't just come in with an idea and apply for a grant. You've got to have some proof that this is actually going to work. It doesn't have to be definitive, and we have many applications where people have tested things in labs and gotten them to 50 to 60% accuracy, and part of the funding money from the technology assessment phase is really to improve accuracy to 80, 90, 100%, depending on what's needed for the product. You must have a stated interest in turning this into innovation into a commercial venture. That is part of the whole process, is basically a plan to turn this into a venture. Even in the phase 1 application, you have to talk about how will this thing reach the market, and that does require some market research. We, the site miners, can help you with that in terms of thinking about which markets to go after and how big those markets are and how to think about how to approach those markets. It is a 9-month, assuming you get the grant, you have 9 months to complete the project. And again, both of these grants are focused on completing a project, typically a development project around the technology. In a technology assessment phase, you're literally taking some prototype, basically some algorithms or some tests or some simulations and turning them into a prototype. The funding is up to $115,000, and we'll talk about the breakout in a second. It is non-dilutive, as we've mentioned. There's no overhead. The money goes into your lab. It's actually applied for by your lab through the business office. There must be a qualifying university principal investigator, which is a researcher, faculty, staff member, but basically you've got to be an employee of the university, essentially, to be a PI. The technology must be disclosed to the UM Ventures team. So you can't just, you have, that is a prerequisite to actually applying for the grant, is that the technology has to be disclosed and owned by the university. The UM Ventures team will also work with you on an intellectual property strategy, and that is also critical. And one of the big stumbling blocks is that you must have an approach to IP protection for your technology. You'll coordinate the application with your site miner, one of us, Dan, Annastasiah, or me, and we will provide a support letter if we believe that you have a shot with the application. To be sure, we are critical. We will not let you apply if we don't think you have even a fighting chance of winning or getting to a defense round. So just know that we are actually a gatekeeper in this process. We're not just a rubber stamp. The applications are accepted every other month. So these start January 1st, and it's literally every other month throughout the year, all year long, year after year. The program's been going on, what is it, almost 10 years now, I think? Are we coming up on 10 years? Yeah, 10 years now. Yeah. And it has been strongly received by the state legislature because in the end, it creates jobs, creates companies, and it creates jobs. And so that is what they're focused on. A typical technology assessment budget for this thing, as we said, it's $115,000, no overhead. There is a requirement for $15,000 for a commercialization plan, which is how are you going to get your innovation to market? You must hire an outside consultant. It can't be a university employee because they're biased, obviously, but you must hire somebody, and we can help you find somebody who can help you with your commercialization plan. $10,000 are allocated toward patent expenses in the UM Ventures office, and then $90,000 is basically yours to basically conduct the project. It is dedicated to staff. It can cover fringe benefits. It can cover tuition for graduate students. It can cover materials, equipment. If you need to rent lab space, or you need to rent time on some sort of machine, all of that is covered under the grant. And so that is really the focus of it. And again, it's really about how do I take some technology that I've created and how do I turn that into, get it closer to something that I might be able to actually prototype and sell to somebody else. So that is technology assessment. Is there any questions about that right now? Do we want to stop for any questions? Or should I just keep barreling
I don't
along?
see any questions, but if anybody has any, please feel free to submit them.
Yeah, put them in the Q&A or the chat. Either one works great. I'm going to keep going on to the, oh, we have a question?
Yeah, we have a question, a raised hand. Sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
I can't actually see all the attendees. So Michael, are you the raised hand?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
I guess my question is, there are two phases. You said an assessment phase and a technology assessment phase.
Well, there's a technology assessment phase and then there's a company formation phase. Those are the two phases.
Okay. And so the technology assessment phase, that the funding that you talked about there is for that. And then the second phase, which is the formation phase, is that separate from this?
Correct. I was just about to go through that. So the technology assessment phase, we just covered the details of that. I was just seeing if anybody had any questions on that. Then I'm going to go through a similar set of 3 slides about company formation.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to keep barreling along and then we can take questions at the end or maybe after we finish the section. So as Michael pointed out, there is a second phase. The second phase is what's called the company formation phase. It's really about, at this point, taking a prototype and building what is considered a minimum viable product, something that you could actually give to somebody else outside the university, not just a bench model, but something you could give to somebody outside the university to actually test. And part of the focus of the company formation phase is typically you've talked to potential customers or partners in the course of getting support letters, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute, but you've talked to folks on the outside about what they would want in your innovation, like what would make it really valuable to them. And so part of the company formation phase is incorporating that customer feedback or that potential partner feedback into an initial product, a product that you could actually offer to others. You've got to have feedback from testers to drive that feature development. So, really you need to have some feedback. And typically what we recommend is that for many products, we recommend that your final milestone of your phase 1, your technology assessment, is a sort of test with an outside party of some sort who can give you feedback and say, it's not quite fast enough, or if it had this user experience, it would be better, or if you were able to modify the material in such a way that made it more flexible. Those would all be elements that you could incorporate into your company formation project. And again, this one is also driven by a project. You must have a project with milestones attached to it. And so obviously, if you've had some feedback from your technology assessment phase about things that users would like to see, that can form the basis for your project for the company formation phase. For the company formation phase, you must have a separate company outside the university, an independent CEO that is running this. It is, we virtually tell you can't. It is impossible to be a full-time faculty member and be the CEO of a startup company. It is, speaking from experience, it is very hard to be the CEO of a startup company, particularly if you expect to get investors and so forth, just because it takes a lot of time. It is not something you can sort of run like an independent study project. It is really a fairly intensive thing. So you must have an independent CEO to run your startup company. Again, it's a 9-month project. This time it's $150,000, not $115,000. It is typically a reimbursable grant or a convertible note, depending upon what types of technology you have. There is, once again, no overhead taken by the university. So all the money goes into the grant and into your project. It is, you must license technology from a qualifying university. So you would be licensing technology from the University of Maryland and putting it into this company, or the company would be licensing it directly. And once again, you coordinate the application with ALA, with the site miners, and we basically will need to provide a support letter for you to submit the application. And again, applications are every other month, just like the technology assessment phase. And this is a typical budget. So it's $150,000. You can spend, $75,000. And again, these numbers are a little more flexible, but up to $10,000 in patent expenses, $75,000 in personnel and fringe benefits. That usually takes up the bulk of what everybody's budget is. It's at least half, sometimes it's more. $25,000 for materials, equipment, supplies. Again, depends upon what kind of project you're working on, whether you need a lot of lab materials or a lot of machine time, or if you need expensive materials. Some things that are more software-based have almost no equipment and supplies. It's some software maybe. And then other costs around, and this is where this is actually very different from the technology assessment phase. This one allows you to actually have some money in the budget for sales and marketing and going and talking to customers and potentially doing I-Core or other things that would actually help you understand the market better and help bring your product to market. And that's actually the critical element of this. By the end of the company formation phase, you should have something, again, that is kind of in a productized form, something you could actually hand to somebody else to test, ideally several customers. And if that's a piece of software, it should be baked enough that you can give it to somebody and let somebody on the outside test it. It should be, loadable and all those kinds of things. If it is a product, a physical product, it should be at least in far enough along state that you could actually give it to somebody and have them test it and say, yes, this works. And that is really the goal of the company formation phase application. I am going to stop here. Ala, does anybody have any questions? And I can't unfortunately see the questions, but can you explain more about the convertible? I do see this one. Can you explain more about convertible note or reimbursement works? So if typically, if you're in life sciences, and this is broad categorization, if it looks like you are probably not going to have revenue, your company's not going to have revenue for at least 5 years. And that is often the case in a life sciences application. I'll let Annastasiah talk about that more in a few slides. But if it doesn't look like you're going to have revenue for a while, or even if your product looks like it may take a while because it either has to get through regulation or there's a long testing cycle, chances are you're going to be a convertible note. And that is the preferred method and has been for a while. If it looks like you're going to start a company next week and generate revenue and you're going to be profitable and this is going to go on, there's a formula upon which you will pay back. They will elect to make it a reimbursable note. The terms of the reimbursable note are not onerous. It's like 3% of profits per year over 10 years, which is a very low payment method. And if you don't pay it all off after 10 years, it's basically forgiven. So it's actually a pretty good deal. You are never obligated to pay very much. And certainly you are not obligated to pay if you don't have profits. I believe payments don't start for 3 years. So you've actually got 3 years to sort of start up, spin up the business and start making sales before they start requiring, a payment back. Good question.
Can you talk a little bit, just one sentence or two, what is a convertible debt note?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, so I haven't done this. So a convertible note is first off, it's a loan. So the money would come in the form of a loan, but the amount of the loan plus whatever interest is attached to the loan would actually convert into equity. So if you are actually starting a company and they anticipate that you're going to raise money for that company, they will basically have a loan to you, but when you raise money, they will convert that loan into shares of the company at whatever price is the going rate in your first round of funding. Now it's a whole lot of stuff, but basically think of it as it's a note that would convert to stock of your future company. And that's how they look at it. It's a very standard model in the industry. It's used hundreds, if not dozens of times. Most angel investors actually typically take a convertible note that will convert again into equity at a future round of funding in your company.
Yeah, thank you.
I think if there are no more questions, I'm gonna hand it over to Dan. Dan, you're up.
All right, so I'm going to talk to you about the basic components of a competitive MII application. Mark, Anastasia, Al, and I are very good at guiding you in how to have a winning application. Writing a competitive MII application is not arduous. This is not a Herculean task by any means. In fact, I think it's easy peasy. We will literally, and we have templated this, we will spoon feed you all the resources and guidance you need to get the job done. What you have to do as faculty, as an innovation team, is hunker down for 5 to 10 hours and author the application. And by the time you're considering an MII application, most of you have already formulated thoughts, you have paper, you probably have a PowerPoint of content regarding your innovation. Some of you have already done disclosures. Some of you will need to do disclosures to the Office of Technology Commercialization, but it's the task of organizing that information into an application format as a draft. That is your first task. The earlier Dan, you do it, I'm sorry.
The thing we didn't say is the application is only 5 pages. I mean, you got supporting documents, but the application is only 5 pages.
The earlier you do it in the submission period, after contacting a sight liner and understanding your eligibility, the easier the process is. So let's talk about this technology validation and outlining technology innovation addressing a commercial problem. We keep talking about the word innovation. In describing your innovation, I think there's two key framings here for the application. This is what makes an application successful. Where does the innovation sit commercially, and where does the tech sit? So when we talk about the innovation continuum and X innovation, is it a evolutionary innovation, which is a small change from the current status quo in terms of solving a commercial problem? Is it cheaper, faster, smaller, smarter? To give an example of this, let's talk about the music industry. I'll date myself again. You know, we started with vinyl records, we went to 8-tracks, we went to cassettes, we went to CDs. All of those were sold out of bricks and mortar retail. So I would call each of those a incremental innovation. So is the innovation a sustaining innovation? Is it a major advancement on the status quo? We base that on some associated metrics, like is the innovation a 2x advancement, 3x advancement, 4x advancement? Is it a next generation innovation? I'll give another example, diesel to electrification. So we're seeing electrification of transportation as a big emphasis. People still driving trucks, they go from A to B, whether you get in a gas golf cart or an electric golf cart, they're relatively the same. They perform the same functions. They may have a different CapEx, they may have a different OpEx, but it's a sustaining innovation. Then we go to disruptive innovation. Are we dislocating business models? Are we dislocating customers and supply chains? Think of AI, think of robotics, think of autonomous delivery, drone delivery. The ROI is completely different. And in many cases, with these innovations, you're eliminating or repurposing labor. So it's so the question is, and I was giving specific examples, but the question is, how does your innovation shake out commercially? How does it monetize in the marketplace? And how do you demonstrate a value proposition to the stakeholders, your customers, your retailers, your OEMs, and what is the ROI payback for the customer? That's what we're exploring and considering and creating a narrative for within this application within technology validation. Let's see. The other thing is, where does the tech sit at the time of the application? So if you are not familiar with the DOE technology readiness level continuum, please take time to understand it. Basically, it's a continuum 1 through 9. You start over here with concept, you get to lab validation, you get to a real world environment, you get to a product prototype MVP, and you get to commercial ready launch within that 1 to 9 continuum. This is going to dictate where the tech sits at the time of the application, the formation of our milestones in demonstrating how we are going to take this innovation on a commercial pathway within the time period of the application. So when you look at these quantifiable, measurable milestones to advance to an MVP, a minimum value product, this is a critical element of your application. And it's all done in the context of where the tech sits and how we're taking it on a commercial pathway. And we're going to outline that with our milestones and with a 9-month project Gantt chart that will give you plenty of guidance on. The other big item, and I will emphasize I will emphasize this on behalf of all the site miners, is one of the things you want to do early in the process is you want to go get letters of support saying that your assertions and your innovation are really valuable to a marketplace, and have that echoed in the marketplace, if then, through the letters of people, hopefully of status within your industry, within your sector. So that usually takes some time. Coordinate with your site miner on who those targets are and what that message might be within those letters, and get started on that early along with your draft. When you get to commercialization planning, the big item there I'd like to emphasize is I'm a big fan of I-Corps. I'm a big fan of market discovery, talking to potential customers about pain points without actually selling your product. This is an invaluable process. I've seen people totally shift their business models and totally readjust their assertions based on their involvement with I-Corps. Always a positive engagement for an innovation team to go through I-Corps in conjunction with your submission or before your submission, preferably. The other three big items, we're just going to say them again. We're going to push you to go secure your recommendation letters and coordinate with your site miner on that. You also have to coordinate with your Office of Research Administration, because you'll be submitting a budget, you'll be outlining a budget, and you'll be adhering to a budget if you're a successful application, and you'll be doing that through your OAR, and they will route your application. So that's something you want to coordinate early as well. Mark? Oh, I'll take the slide again. So I think I've emphasized all of these points here, so I don't want to be redundant here. But key things are coordinate with your site miner, coordinate with the Office of Technology Commercialization on your IP, consider doing I-Corps, and coordinate with your site miner on your letters of recommendation in support of your project. Get a draft done early, and you'll have a successful application.
Very good. Thanks, Dan. Let me just say one other quickly before we hand it over to Annastasiah. I think the critical element here is, unlike many of the grants that you write, where you're really trying to push the envelope for scientific achievement or engineering achievement, this is really meant to be something that is reproducible and frankly easy to prove, right? That's kind of a goal here, is basically something, if you make it too hard, it's never going to turn into a product that somebody can buy in the market, because it'll be too hard for them to use, or it'll be too risky for them to use. So you're actually looking for something that you are very confident you can make work repeatably over and over again. And so that is a critical element. And these are the key things that reviewers will beat us up on and beat the applications up on. So definitely pay attention there. I'm going to hand it over to Annastasiah, because life sciences is a little bit different.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me?
Pretty faint.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but it's very faint.
How about now?
No better.
How about now?
That's better. Yeah, go with that.
Okay. All right. So I think there are just 4 points I need to make. But first, I'd like to give a quick contextual definition of what life sciences is. I think in my mind, it's a catch-all for ag biotech, as Mhaka alluded to earlier, genetic engineering for agriculture, therapeutics, prophylactic and therapeutic vaccines, even cosmetics, and then the picks and shovels like diagnostics and devices. It could also be an enabling technology, for example, CRISPR, nanofluidics, novel drug delivery, and formulation approaches. So the life sciences has a different set of reviewers, and there's some nuances to the evaluation and winning criteria. So just to add on to what Dan and Mark have covered, I think the 4 elements I would like to emphasize are, the first is on the intellectual property. I think clearly stating the patent protection in the form of disclosure to the university, provisional issued patents. What that patent is it composition of matter? Is it a method of use? It's actually very critical because it really impacts your go-to-market and commercialization strategy. So you really need to convey a clear and robust IP strategy relating to your technology and product. The second item is more technical oriented. And so despite our quest for innovative ideas, we're all risk averse to some extent. So reviewers require a sound scientific underpinning in the form of preliminary proof data to support your hypothesis and the utility of any technology or product that you will pursue. In other words, why should we believe your concept will work? What gives us comfort that this will get to market? The third one is around commercialization and really making sure that you have a plausible go-to-market strategy. In the life sciences, you must account for the regulatory reimbursement complexities, as well as the complexities associated with research and development. So you could use similarly regulated technologies as proxies for your own technology. So having a path that you would follow. And if you're truly disruptive, as Dan alluded to earlier with his music analogy, it is necessary, absolutely necessary, to seek validation of your technology from related industry players that would further develop it, that would market it, or use it. And they definitely need to provide some sort of feedback and validation, i.e., if you build it, we will use it. And in addition to that, I think one of the resources we're lucky to have is you can consult with your own University of Maryland experts where relevant experience is needed, for example, regulatory support to incorporate into your proposal. The last thing I just want to touch on is that commercialization in the life sciences is a long and tortuous journey. So I hear Mark and Dan talk about, oh, we're going into revenue year 1, year 2, year 3. This is not like that. However, despite this, you should always keep the promised land in mind. What is the ultimate approved product? And what will it take at a top level in terms of resources and capabilities to get there? And what are key steps for fast proof that create value along the way? And in most instances, it's always good to find strategies for near-term revenue through licensing, carve-outs, etc. And doing so while mitigating technical and commercialization risk. So in a nutshell, I think for a winning life sciences application, despite the 5 pages, I think there's a lot of thought that needs to go into it. And I've seen some PIs here 5 pages and they think they can do it overnight, but it's actually more difficult because you just have to make sure you hit all the points we've described. So I think that's what I can add in terms of the life sciences application. And all these icons basically show you that anything we might want to use to for preventive care, diagnosing disease, treating or managing disease, and living longer, happier lives with good lifestyle could fall in the life sciences sector. So thanks.
Great,
I'll
thanks.
move on.
I think the 2 things that are important here. One is, as Annastasiah said, we call this life sciences, but I think it increasingly has a broader reach. I mean, you added a couple extra icons in there, but plants, things that are genetically engineered, are not technically life sciences, but they often fall into the same basket because they are a regulatory industry. And so I think that you're also seeing, small molecules, new molecules, those would also qualify in the life sciences technology, because again, that will be a regulated technology. I think two other comments, Annastasiah, you sort of pointed out a couple of things that I meant to say along the way. This is a very short application, and for the viewers, the hardest part is actually cramming all the things in that you're supposed to talk about. I said it was a 5-page application. You really only get 1 page to talk about your technology, right? So you've actually got to, dumb down your technology, because your reviewer is typically, this is not like the NSF or NIH. They are not going to be experts in your area. They might know something about the technology you're talking about, but they are not going to be experts. So part of your challenge is explaining the technology in about 1 page in a way that a reasonably sophisticated layperson could understand it. A big bulk of the application is around this business application. How is your innovation going to make it to market? It's not all just about sort of what your technology is. Take a quick break. Is there any questions that we have in the audience?
Yeah.
Yes.
So here's a question. Does MII phase 3 application need to go through the university's business office, or should the startup company be the lead unit and do subcontracts into university units?
Good question. So the money does go to, and actually I'll jump in here, but the money's going into the company. The company is actually filing the application. So the business office, from that perspective, is not involved. However, the company must have a license to the technology, or in the process of getting a license to the technology from the university. And so there has to be a conversation between the company and the university about licensing that technology. Is that right, Ala?
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. So in order for you to apply for MII phase 3, you have to have a license or an option to the technology from the university. Has to be finalized. The company obviously has to be formed, license finalized, and then you would work. You still need the site miners approval letter to submit. So they have to, so one of either Mark or Dan or Annastasiah have to approve your application to be submitted. And the UM Ventures office has to approve it as well. But the money itself does not go to the university at all. It goes to the company. So all of it goes to the company.
Very good.
That answers the question.
Yeah, good. Any other questions?
We have a raised hand. Michael, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, this is Michael. I'm just confused because this term phase 3 was just introduced. Is this separate from the technology for company formation phase?
You have tripped across. Yes, you have tripped across. So unfortunately, we've all three of us have been around, or all four of us have been around so long. There used to be a phase 2, but then they ultimately merged phase 1 and phase 2 and called it technology assessment. And then there's the company formation assessment. Unfortunately, those of us who have been around so long keep slipping back into the old parlance and keep calling it phase 1 and phase 3, which is wrong. That's not how they officially refer to it anymore. It's the technology assessment and the company formation. Those are the 2 phases. And again, for us old birds who've been around with the program, we keep referring to them as phase 1 and phase 3 just because that's shorthand. Bad shorthand, but shorthand nonetheless.
The problem is some of the TEDCO documents still refer to phase 3. So basically the
do they?
3 is now company formation, and the old phase 1 and 2 are now technology validation phase. So I hope that clarifies the confusion.
Good catch, Michael.
Ala?
Anybody else?
Yeah, I see another question that says, do we need to have the licensed agreement in place before we apply for phase 3 funding?
Do we need to have the license agreement before we apply for phase 3? It is best if you do. It is best if you do. You need to at least have, you can, and I'll let you talk about this, but you can have an option agreement very quickly, which is easy, I think, from UM Ventures perspective. To get a license agreement, it would be better if you had it. Again, these are all about telling a story, in your application. So it's easier, it's better to say that you already have the license agreement done. But if you're in the process or you have an option, that's also acceptable in terms of filing for a phase 3 application. Is that right, Ala?
Yeah, so you can be in process. You have to have a signed license agreement before the money will be transferred, before the the convertible note can be executed. So you can be in process of doing it, but if the agreement has to be executed before you can get the money. I hope that answers the question. Option agreement is much faster, but the preferred is the license agreement, obviously, for everybody. We have more questions. Do you want me to read them?
Yeah.
Do you want to pick?
Sure, would you?
The answer. So do you have any resources recommendation for chemical engineering projects?
I'm not sure I completely understand the question. If you're looking for ideas for technologies, is that, I guess, is that the question?
Yeah, I think we're going to need clarification
can
on
you,
that one.
Yeah, he raised his hand. Can you activate him, Ala?
Let me do that. Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Sophie.
Oh, it's Sophie. Okay.
Yeah. Sophie, we can't hear you. Yeah, we can't hear you, Sophie.
How about now?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it better?
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We
Sorry.
can hear you now.
Yeah. So my question is, I think you have some resources and knowledge on the life science applications, and I think our project is more on the chemical engineering kind. So which I think is developing a prototype bigger and bigger and bigger rather than many and many and many. So I am just thinking whether we have any experience and expertise on that area so we can lean to.
Oh, absolutely. So, so Dr. Mhaka is our life science site miner. So she is an expert in life sciences, but Mark and Dan are not life science people, just to clarify that.
But Sophie, you're specifically looking for chemical engineering experience. Is that what you're looking for, or expertise?
Yes, basically building big reactors and scale up, not kind of from like the bench scale to maybe the house scale, that kind of scale up, like the volume increase rather than like think the number increase.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're on the right track. I mean, we don't, that is the chemical engineering types of projects. We have not had as many, but we have had a significant number in the last few years. Your process is, you know, because you're talking about carbon production and carbon management and so forth, that is a different kind of approach. Your phase one was very successful. I mean, people understood exactly what was going on there. We don't have anybody on the team who's specifically a chemical expert, but we can certainly try to find you some chemical experts in the field.
Okay, thank you very much. We can connect offline.
That'd be great. Yeah, that'd be great.
And we have lots of questions.
Good.
So I think this one we answered. Okay, so we have another question from Sarah Oates. I had a UM Ventures seed grant in 2017-18 for my invention and we developed a software prototype. Am I still eligible for MII funding for the product? And the answer is absolutely yes, Sarah. So seed grant is actually, the idea of seed grants was to get you ready for MII. So to get you a little bit closer to where you would be eligible or be competitive with MII applications. So absolutely yes. Right. Another question, can a full-time professional track researcher at UMD be the CEO of the company, or do they need to resign from UMD?
I'll take that one. I think the honest answer is you should find a CEO from the industry who has experience selling your type of product to people in the industry. I would not strongly recommend that a researcher quit their day job as a researcher to become CEO of the company. Fundamentally, what reviewers are looking for is they're looking for the probability that your product will be sold into the market. And ideally, you've got somebody who came from the market and has experience selling into that customer base. So I think, while your science experience could be enormously helpful in terms of chief technology officer, chief research officer, in terms of the CEO, you really should be thinking very carefully about finding somebody who's got experience in business to complement your research and technical expertise. And so that would be my strong recommendation.
Also to add to that, TEDCO MII does not have that requirement, but if you apply for an SBIR grant, then you would have to resign, because SBIR grant does require that somebody works at the company at 51%, so that would not be allowed. However, for MII, it's not a conflict. Typically, the best situations we've seen was for a postdoc or PhD student would become the lead for the company initially, form the company, and then attract an outside professional CEO. Or another way of doing it that we've seen done successfully would be to attract a potential CEO during your technology validation grant and have them pay them $15,000, use your $15,000 commercialization planning money to pay them to create commercialization plan for you. And that way it's a very good test to see if there's a good fit for somebody to become a full-time CEO, for you to partner with them using somebody else's money. Also, what we've noticed is that people who are not consultants and are doing commercialization planning for their own potential company, they actually do a lot more work and the end result is a lot more robust. Wouldn't you say so?
We got some of the questions I think are answered further down. There was one question that says, how flexible are the budget categories on the company formation phase? Pretty flexible is the answer to that question. You can definitely you can move money around as long as you're supporting the project and you're supporting marketing and sales activities as well. There's only one true restriction, and that is you can only use 30% of the funds for what they describe as overhead costs, which would be things like travel, things that are not specifically related to the project itself. So there's definitely some flexibility there. I don't know what a NIST end-step program is, so I'm going to have to punt on that one. Ala, do you have any idea what that is?
We don't really work with end-step program. It doesn't necessarily conflict with MII. So I don't think we should be commenting on that.
Okay, Michael, if we have more questions, maybe we can talk offline or do that.
Yeah.
I know we're coming up on time, so it'd be good if we sort of finished out the slides. Ala, do you want me to walk this one through, or do you want to take this one?
I can take this one real quick. So this is just a general process overview how the application works. So first and foremost, you would need to submit invention disclosure to UM Ventures. And if you don't know how to do that, I can provide you with a link. It's basically just filling out a quick form saying who you are, who the inventors or creators of technology is, or and if there were any grants used to create this technology, what are those grants? And then a description of technology. If you have papers, PowerPoint presentations and such, you can attach those. You don't need to create anything new. Then you would work with somebody at UM Ventures to create IP strategy for your technology. So somebody who is trained to do that would analyze and figure out if it needs patent protection, copyright protection and such, and would actually do that. Then you would work with me on getting a site miner assigned. Typically, site miners are assigned on what your technology is. Is it life sciences? Is it engineering, software and such? So typically all life science applications go to Annastasiah. Many software, VR type, especially VR type, AI type applications would go to Mark, and Dan would take a lot of robot energy related type of applications and such. Then the hard work of working with your SiteMiner to review the application would begin. Typically, there are several drafts, several versions between you and the SiteMiner. So you would write your first draft, and they would provide you with feedback and such. And usually there are between 2 and 3, sometimes 4 revisions of the applications to make it competitive. Keep in mind that what we've seen is it's really hard for you as a scientist to, out of 5 pages, to dedicate only 1 page describing technology. It's usually really difficult because most of your other grant applications are probably all about describing technology. So this is usually a really difficult shift to make. And also keep in mind that the SiteMiners are the ones who attend every single reviewer meeting. They listen to presentations, or they listen to reviewer comments and questions and how reviewers tear apart all of the applications. So they know really well what exactly reviewers are going to pay attention to, what kind of reaction they will have, what kind of questions they will have. So, to make your application more competitive, it's very recommended that you go through a regional I-Corps program, either before or during your application creation, to do additional customer discovery and get potentially more additional industry letters of support and more industry input. Saying in your application that you went either through regional or national I-Corps program is a very valuable thing to add. So I think Mark mentioned before and Dan mentioned before the importance of industry support letters. So these shouldn't be from your fellow researchers at another institution. It really needs to be come from the industry. And they don't need to say, I want to buy it, but they should say, yes, this is a problem in the industry. And if this solution came about, it would be very valuable. And if they want to say that they would consider buying it, that's great as well. So again, you will see that SiteMiner input is all throughout this very important step that is often forgotten in all of this, because you're focused on creating this great application, answering all the questions, cramming all of the information in 5 pages. Like Anastasia said, it's really difficult. And then invariably people forget about routing this through Aura. So don't forget to route this through Aura. If you don't know who your Aura person is, find that out in advance. Sometimes they take longer. Some of them can do it very quickly, some of them cannot, especially if they're not familiar with MII applications. So don't forget the Aura routing process. And then when everything is good and ready to go, you will receive Ventures approval letter from me. And I usually send it to the SiteMiner, and the SiteMiner holds it until the application is absolutely ready to go and they feel like it is positioned for success, it has a chance of winning, and they have a chance of defending this application in front of the reviewers, and they have a reasonable chance to win funding. That's when they will give you their approval letter, and then the PI would go on the TEDCO portal and submit the entire packet, which, by the way, should not be exceeding 15 pages total. So the entire packet should not be exceeding 15 pages, and TEDCO is very strict about it. So don't exceed the page numbers. And so you would submit the application, you would include your Aura routing number, and the Aura employee who approved the application, their name would be included. So that's basically the process. Anybody has any questions on that?
I'll take it. You want me to take it back? I'm happy to run you
Go
down.
ahead.
Yeah, so the good news about this program is it's all very quick. I mean, if you submit, you know, on the first of a month, on about 90 days, you'll find out if you're going to get the money. They typically, you know, as we said, they start, the submission is typically the first of the month, every other month throughout the year. And the review process, once you submit, it takes about 6 weeks to get reviewer comments. They send them to outside reviewers, and then they collate their responses, and then they send them back. If you make it through, you get a high enough score, and the scoring is up to 1 to 5 or 0 to 5. If you get a high enough score, which is typically around a 3, they will share the reviewer's comments with your SiteMiner. Your SiteMiner will then, typically about 10 days before there's a defense, SiteMiner will then share the responses, the reviewer's comments with you. We'll have about 10 days to come up with sort of a defense responses to all their reviewer comments. For a technology assessment phase, the reviewer goes in and does the tough work. We actually go in there and spar with the reviewers and try to answer all their questions and really give them a stronger sense. The goal is to get a 3.8. That is typically the funding level. It varies a little bit, but that's typically the funding level that's pretty approved. For a company formation, if you go through a company formation, the company CEO, not the SiteMiner, but the company CEO goes in there and defends the presentation. And that is getting closer to an investor pitch, more so than sort of just a grant review defense. And so that's where the company formation comes in. After that activity, the defense happens, the recommendations are then gathered by TEDCO. They are sent to the MII review board, which must approve all of the grants. And then the PI is typically informed about 3 weeks after the defense actually happens, because there's typically the board meetings are scheduled about 2 weeks afterwards. If you don't make it at either the sort of initial submission phase or through the reviewer defense phase, you can resubmit up to 2 times. There is sort of you miss a cycle because of the way the program works, but you can resubmit on the next cycle that's available to you. And I think somebody was asking, what is the probability of success? Typical success rate, including resubmissions, is about 60%. So it's actually a pretty good program and pretty positive. The University of Maryland in 2020, in fiscal 2020, had about 20 applications, 12 were approved for a total of 1.4, almost $1.5 million. So it's a great program, and the money is actually reasonably easy to get as long as you have a good application. We've had a number of success stories come out of the University of Maryland. I know a few of these, but they range. Air Agility is a drone company. They had a unique design for drone technology. MF Fire came out of the fire engineering group. It basically is building sort of computerized fire, basically stoves, fire stoves for burning wood, and has been reasonably successful. Grip Boost was a company I worked with once upon a time that made football gloves sticky again. They had developed, some chemical engineers and a football player had come up with technology that made football players' gloves sticky again. They've since branched out to baseball, to make the bats tacky, golf, and a number of other sports. Blue Lean, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to tell you what that is. Ali, do you want to talk about that one?
So before I do, I realized that we ran over time. So I know that Annastasiah needs to go, but I'm happy to stay on for additional time for additional Q&A. Unfortunately, Annastasiah has to drop off. I know. I'd like to thank you I'd like to thank everybody who joined us today, including Annastasiah and everybody else. But we can wrap this up and stay on for additional time for those who have time. Again, thank you.
And we're going to post this as a video and the slides, right, Ala?
Right, yeah. We'll send the slides and we will post the video on our Startup UMD YouTube channel.
So yeah, fantastic. So we just have a couple more slides. Bye, Annastasiah. Yeah. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I actually learned a lot too. So thanks, everybody. I'll see you soon. Cheers.
All right, bye-bye.
So the lesson here is basically there's a lot of different technologies that make it through the MII program, and there's a lot of successful ones. There are a number of other resources attached to the University of Maryland, including University of Maryland I-Corps program, MIPS. We have various entrepreneurs and residents that you can also access through UM Ventures. UM Ventures staff is very helpful when it comes to IP and go-to-market strategy, as well as trying to find industry partners. And then there's the MTech group that obviously supports startups on the University of Maryland campus. Ala, do you want to give the plug for I-Corps?
Yes, so I mentioned before that I-Corps is a fantastic program. to do customer discovery. So typically what happens is here at the university, we have all these great technologies, all these great inventions and innovations. So we have all these great solutions in search of a problem that they could solve. And so I-Core is a great opportunity to talk to people and ask them questions about specific problems that they have within their processes, within their industries, within their companies, to find out whether or not your solution would be a good fit, and who needs your solution, how would they use it, how would they interact with it before you build out the final product. So at the University of Maryland, we run one of the best regional I-Core programs. The next cohort is forming right now. It's going to be held August 2021. The applications are accepted. It's a 2-week program. There is no fee to participate in it, and you can apply. There are info sessions coming up. There's more information on icore.umd.edu.
Great. You want to take that one too, Ala?
Sure. So if you have any questions about your eligibility, to discuss which site minor would be assigned to you, please contact me at the email listed there. More information and RFA document is on MII TEDCO website. There's a link to disclose your invention right there. And our YouTube channel has a lot of really great resources, and this video, a lot of great videos that we've held in the past, and this video will be posted there as well.
Great. Well, thanks again, everybody, for attending. We really appreciate your coming today. We will post this. Feel free to reach out to us. You can reach out to any of the site miners or reach out to Ala on the University of Maryland website. I'm Komisky at umd.edu. If you want to reach out to me anytime, I'm happy to discuss technologies, markets, all those things. Ala is your gatekeeper for getting a site miner assigned to you, though. So definitely reach out to Ala. All right, thanks everybody. I appreciate it. Ala, any last comments?
No, just wanted to thank you, Dan and Anastasia, for preparing and delivering this presentation. And also obviously to those who signed in and stayed even long over time to listen, and to those who will watch this in the future on YouTube as well. Thank you.
All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. Have a great afternoon.